When the whole family comes together to watch the game, nobody wants to miss a second of the action to run to the grocery store. With Instacart, you can get all your weekly groceries in as fast as an hour. Less time shopping means more game time. Let's go. Visit instacart.com to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. $10 minimum per order. Additional terms apply.
Does number one sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Welcome back in, everybody. Congratulations to Jeff taking those Wind Surge vouchers. Thanks for tuning in, Jeff. Thanks for everybody joining us on our video stream. You can find it on our KFH Facebook page, KFH YouTube page, and on Sports Daily Twitter page. Jacob Albrock, Tommy Castor here, Jad Chambers producing. We're making our way through a Wednesday. We've talked a little NBA playoffs. We've talked a little Wichita State baseball. Big winners last night. 1-0 in a thriller over K-State. Let's talk about the transfer portal, Tommy. Now, we'll go 2 places. We'll go one with a commitment here. And the IHOP hotline, by the way, always open 869-1240 for you. Kansas State gets their guy, right? Max Asmus ends up at Texas. And I don't know, you might say this is the next best thing. I think it's probably pretty close to on par with Asmus as Tyler Perry, who was the North Texas star, Conference USA Player of the Year, really shined in that NIT run that they had on the way to a championship. He was 4th nationally in three-pointers made, inside the top 20 in three-point percentage. Big-time guard, 5'11", kind of reminds us, undersized guard. They went from Marquise Noel to trying for Max Asmus, now to Perry. And look, Tyler Perry is a big-time player. And he had connections, obviously, through his former coach. And he didn't pick his former coach at Texas Tech, who I think was a finalist there with McCasland. And now he goes and he's going to play for Jerome Tang, and a perfect opportunity and a big-time commitment and another nice addition for Kansas State.
It's a big name. It's a big name coming out of the transfer portal, and we've been waiting on that for a while, right? I mean, it wasn't that we didn't think that Jerome Tang and the Wildcats would be able to work the transfer portal well. I think we had an idea that they would, and they were in on big-time players like Max Asmus, but we hadn't gotten any kind of major commitment from any transfer portal players up to this point for K-State until now. That's a great addition. I mean, Terry is a good player. And so I think that having that commitment for, Tang and the Wildcats, again, it shows you the pedigree and the way that players are responding to what Jerome Tang has built at Kansas State. And I think it's the first domino to fall. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see, a couple more guys make commitments to Kansas State.
Well, so Perry rejoins apparently Jareem Dowling, which was a connection there. Dowling coached him at North Texas. Dowling now an assistant at Kansas State, so that's cool. Another cool thing about Perry is he played at Coffeyville. He played down at Coffeyville Community College, so he's back in the state of Kansas. That's also interesting. And, it also highlights, I think, too, the importance of junior college basketball now. I think that there is a concern in the transfer portal of what it will do to high school recruits. But I think something that may amplify is why you might want to give a nod or a look over to a junior college, because you can go in, you can play right away. We know the quality of basketball that exists there, and it catapults a lot of guys. It may be a different path, but it's another path. All right, another big name in the portal that's been sort of lingering there. If it wasn't Max Asmus that everybody that has been watching, it's Hunter Dickinson. And Dickinson, the ultra talented player out of Michigan, has really, I don't want to say he's fooled everybody. He hasn't given everybody just a whole lot to deal with here. 18 points, 9 rebounds at Michigan. He's a center. He's a junior, so you might have, extended time with him. He's visited most of the big programs you can think of. And everybody's just sort of sitting and waiting, and he can highlight a class for KU. But it doesn't sound like, Tommy, that he is ready to make that call. There's reports out there that he may make a decision today. There were already reports that it was going to be this week. Some people thought it was going to be yesterday, and I think he pulled the Olay on everybody, Tommy, it sounds like.
Yeah, he was on a Barstool Sports podcast yesterday, and you and I were talking about it last night. The title of the podcast was Hunter Dickinson has an announcement to make. So, of course, everybody's like, all right, he's going to announce what school he's going to. And then he didn't. And the announcement was, I don't know where I'm going. And so I don't know if it's just, a great pulling one over on everybody situation, or if he genuinely still doesn't know. But he's considering Kansas. He's considering Kentucky, considering Maryland is in the mix. Villanova is in the mix. Those are the main schools that are pursuing him. But I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where everybody is waiting with bated breath on what he's going to do, because he can be an immediate difference maker for any of the teams that he goes to. And I would imagine with the commitments that, Kansas has already gotten from Nick Timberlake, and then they had that commitment from Arterio Morris last week. If they can add Hunter Dickinson to the mix with DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams and the other guys they currently have coming back, I think that vaults the Jayhawks to national title contenders right away.
I think it does too. It's going to be it's going to be one of those things where, yeah, maybe in the preseason, but there's still, to me, too many new faces to make that sort of proclamation. But there would absolutely be enough coming back. Look, with those freshmen and Wando and KJ and Hunter Dickinson in the lineup, you'd feel pretty good about that, right?
Can you imagine a world where you've got KJ Adams potentially playing at the 4, which is probably more of his natural position.
I know.
And then Hunter Dickinson as a true big. And we talked about it before, all the different years and the times that Bill Self has had traditional bigs at the 5. And what for God's sakes, one of them just won the NBA MVP in Joel Embiid. So he's got a track record in developing really, really talented bigs, and Hunter Dickinson could be another one of them.
Well, and I think so if I'm making a pitch to Dickinson, that's where I point. The most successful program, I think, and I could be forgetting about somebody, but translating centers into the NBA over the last little while has been Kansas, right? Look at the former MVP. Look at the guy that won the MVP, I should say, yesterday, Joel Embiid, for starters. Doak was one of the great college basketball players of his time when he was here. David McCormick was the centerpiece of a national championship a couple of years ago. So they have that track record, but Kentucky does too. And that Kentucky gets interesting. They need a replacement for Sheboy, right? And so I think that you're going to have plenty of NIL opportunities at either place. I would guess that those are the two leading schools. I know Kentucky people have cooled a little bit on their, probability. But I'm not.
Don't count out Maryland. Don't count out Maryland. That's home for him. And so I think that it's a situation where you might be looking at Kansas versus Maryland. I don't even know if
I thought
versus
Nova
Kentucky
had snuck in. Alexandria, Virginia. How far is Alexandria? Where's Maryland? College Park? Is that right?
Yeah.
College Park, Maryland. Let's see. College Park, Maryland to Alexandria, Virginia is it's a half hour. Yeah, that's pretty close. Woo! Yeah, I don't know. So maybe that does make them more interesting than I was giving them credit for. By the way, if anybody's watching our video stream right now, we've got a visitor here. I've got a kid home today. Braylon, can you wave to the camera, or are you going to be shy? You wave? Oh, you didn't need to say hi. I was
there
just
we
saying
go.
Wave, buddy. Yeah. So he snuck. I told you this was going to happen.
I love it.
Yeah, this reminds me of when we were smack in the middle of the pandemic, right? And everyone was having to work from home, and kids were just like popping into everything and getting into it. But yeah, I don't know Dickinson in his status. Tommy, what does your gut say?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think it's going to be really tough one way or another, because the one thing that Dickinson has done a good job of, not only just internally, but externally as well, his team, they've not really given much of an indication one way or another. So it's, typically you're hearing some rumblings here and there. You've got people that are reporting different things. Really, I don't know if anybody really knows. And that's what has made this decision, so big, is because we're not getting any sort of indication one way or another. I could say right now that, I think Kansas is the most likely landing spot for him, but that would just be a guess. I mean, there really is no intel really one way or another right now. We're not going to know for sure until Hunter Dickinson says it out of his own mouth. And so that's what's made this so interesting, because typically when you've got, transfer portal players that are looking at different schools, somebody's going to leak it or somebody's going to report it. That has not been the case with Hunter Dickinson.
Well, look, I think that, you get a lot of interesting information out there, and I will agree with you that there's no lean here. We thought we had leans with Asmus, and it went back and forth.
Yeah.
So I don't put a whole lot of stock in this stuff because I think rosters change and things change. It's really interesting with him because he's such a high-profile player. And I think it's totally okay, too, by the way. And I don't get the indication that people are frustrated or upset, and I hope that they don't, because this is a big decision, right? It's an even bigger decision now when this is kind of it for most players. They're only going to do this once under the new rules. So we got to just have patience with guys and let
how
them
much
do
of
their
it,
thing.
How much of it is NIL related too? I mean, it very well could have been a situation. I don't know. I have no proof on this, but maybe he had every intention of going on this podcast yesterday and announcing what school he was planning on going to. That could have been it. And then maybe last minute he thought, maybe I can get more NIL dollars if I delay it. And there could have been a school out there, and I don't know which one it was, but maybe a school that was anticipating him to announce for them, and then he said he wasn't, and now the NIL opportunities might be going up. I mean, I think what he's doing right now is he's trying to drive demand, and that's what a lot of these players are trying to do now. They're trying to make as big of a payday as they possibly can. I would imagine that KU's NIL collective and Kentucky's NIL collective and Maryland's NIL collective, Villanova's, I would imagine that they are all jockeying for position right now to see who can potentially write the biggest check.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's probably going to get comparable, between one place and the other. It's hard to look at this overall at transfer class rankings, see different things from different people, and different sites evaluate this in different ways. West Virginia, oddly enough, has some consistency among those lists of being one of the top teams right now. So that's certainly good news for the Big 12, I think. Let's see what CBS Sports. I haven't checked CBS Sports. Let me see what they've got. Well, they've got a listing of players, and Hunter Dickinson is their top guy, by the way. Tyler Perry was high on their list, so there's a lot to it. On3, which is kind of a new transfer portal addition, and they've been all over a lot of stuff. Just for the record, has Kansas State down at 27, I think. But, of course, Kansas State has the great class coming in of young players, as does KU. But you see teams like West Virginia thriving here. We know Texas Tech was one of those teams last year. They were, that did that, and that ended up being a little bit of a disappointment there. Arkansas high on the list. TCU is on 247's list, ranked pretty high, Tommy. The Big 12 well represented in this thing. But a name like Dickinson, that's the thing with these. A name like Dickinson, if he lands at Kansas, is all of a sudden going to flip that upside down and move them way up. And the other hard thing about these lists is not a lot of teams need everything, right? There are teams. Kansas does, by the way. I think Kansas absolutely needs another player. Don't mistake what I'm saying. I think Kansas State needs another one too. But Kansas needs Hunter Dickinson. This wouldn't be just some luxury pick, right? If they don't get Dickinson, they're going to have to adjust. It's not all in on him, but it's definitely one you'd like to see.
They played without a player the caliber of Hunter Dickinson last season with KJ Adams at the 5. And I think it was good, and I think KJ Adams developed well throughout the course of the season, but it was a different brand of basketball than we were used to seeing the Jayhawks play. And so I think that Bill Self for sure would love to get back to that traditional, comfortable, having a solid 5, a solid center playing for his team. And so that's why they're going after Hunter Dickinson the way that they are. I think it makes sense to have him slot in at the 5 and KJ at the 4. And then you've got, some big time shooters and Morris and Timberlake and, DeJuan Harris leading the entire charge. Oh, and don't forget about the guys that they do still have returning, coming off the bench, and Ernest Uday, who can still develop, as a big. I don't know what Zuby Ejiofor looks like long term, but they've got him still on the roster. So they've got other pieces, but for sure, I mean, Hunter Dickinson is the cream of the crop, as far as who they're targeting. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if they land Dickinson, if you see a player like Zuby Ejiofor potentially transfer out, because at that point you're relegating him to, the end of the bench. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see that happen.
Well, no, yeah, and that'd be cool for another team to get an opportunity for Ejiofor to come in and play too. Like the transfer portal, giveth and taketh away. I get it. But yeah, if you're getting 2 years potentially of Dickinson, then I would I wouldn't hope that he did, but it would make a ton of sense. And then that gives an opportunity for some other places. Let's just use Wichita State as an example. Right. Like then you've got this, 4 or 5 star caliber big out there all of a sudden that needs an opportunity to play. And somebody else, when you're a school like Wichita State, who ultimately I think will get in the mix for some of these big players right now, that could be like, man, we could use you right now. Now, Wichita State's not a great example because they've already got several post players. They probably wouldn't even enter the conversation. But as an example of how that can, help you, that's awesome. That's a cool thing. Like that gives opportunities to different people. And if KU doesn't get him and they roll in with Uday and Ejiofor, it's going to be better than rolling in with Uday and Ejiofor last year, right? Because those guys will have an entire offseason to improve, which we assume that they both will.
I've heard people say also it's not fully about the NIL for Hunter Dickinson. It's more about how can he develop. And I get that.
That's where Kansas shines.
But I think it's more NIL than maybe what people think. Like I think he's going to try to find the biggest payday possible, because I'm not convinced that Hunter Dickinson, even with development at a program like Kansas or Kentucky, is a viable NBA player. I think he's going to be he already is a great college basketball player. He'll continue to be a great college basketball player, but I don't know if that's, pro worthy necessarily. So why not cash in right now? And if you develop and you make it to the NBA, great. But in my mind right now, I think it's got to be about NIL for Hunter Dickinson. Make as much money as you can right now, because nothing else is guaranteed after college.
Yeah, it's well, that's right. Like the NIL money's, and Kansas is going to be a player in the NIL realm, just where everybody else is. But yes, for a talent like Hunter Dickinson, it becomes, where do you make the most long-term money? And I think going to Kansas and developing there is the best way to do that. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We've got giveaways. We're pretty open here the rest of the way. Randall Cobb news, which is always, you can guess what that is. We've got it for you. The IHOP hotline's always open, 869-1240. We've still got another giveaway to come here in the program. Lots still to go as we make our way through a Wednesday edition of Sports Daily.
You gotta hear this.
Go ahead. I think I want to hear this.
Sports Daily is on KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH. Jake Ballbrock, Tommy Casper, Chad Chambers producing. 869-1240, the IHOP hotline, open the rest of the way. Pretty good time to jump in there if you've got anything on your mind, as we are pretty wide open the rest of the way. Glad to be here with you on Sports Daily today as we make our way through. In, I don't know, maybe the least surprising news ever, Randall Cobb is now joining the Jets, rejoining Aaron Rodgers. I suppose it's surprising because Cobb's getting up there in age and not super effective anymore. And honestly, like I say, least surprising, not even in a condescending way. I don't think this is a bad idea if you're the Jets. I think, anything you can do potentially to make Aaron Rodgers more comfortable, but maybe even more important than that, Tommy, to bridge the gap between Aaron Rodgers and a room full of new receivers. Like I wonder when Rodgers seemingly wants Cobb to be a part of these places. Don't you think it just has to do with like trying to get everybody on the same page? Like, they're great friends. We know that, but Cobb, could you come in here and help me get this group on board and on task with what we need to do here? I mean, I think all jokes aside, I think it's probably pretty smart.
Well, Randall Cobb is like that really cuddly teddy bear that you had when you were little, and that you couldn't leave without that teddy bear. You couldn't sleep without that teddy bear. You felt comfortable with that teddy bear, every night. The teddy bear got worn. The teddy bear got stains all over it. Your parents had to wash it multiple times, probably had to sew it back up. It got up there in age, it was falling apart, but you always needed to have that teddy bear. That's that teddy bear. That's Randall Cobb with Aaron Rodgers. Like, Aaron Rodgers has to have Randall Cobb there. And it's not just Randall Cobb. Like, Aaron Rodgers has always had a couple of receivers over the course of his career that they get him, they understand him, they play really well with him. They make him feel comfortable. He makes them feel comfortable. He's made them a lot of money over the course of his career. Jordy Nelson was one of them. Randall Cobb is one of them. I think Alan Lazard has been one of them. Devontae Adams for a few years was one of those guys. He's had those receivers that he feels most comfortable with. And of course, it blew up last year when he had all these young receivers like Romeo Doubs and other guys that he wasn't gelling with. And you saw the frustration from Aaron Rodgers because he didn't have those players that he felt comfortable with. He didn't have his teddy bear with him. And now he's got his teddy bear in Randall Cobb. It makes sense in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I don't think Cobb's coming in there to play much. I mean, he didn't do that last year. Will he play some? Yeah, maybe. But it's interesting. Remember, and I hadn't, this news kind of had me looking. I forgot they added Alan Lazard. The Jets did. Like, I totally forgot about that. They have McCole Hardman there. Garrett Wilson's already there. They have Corey Davis, who's been good in the past. Denzel Mims has been good in the past. They're pretty deep at that spot. We've talked about their receivers, and that's after they traded Elijah Moore, who I really like Elijah Moore, right? Like, I think he's a really good player. They still are loaded, and they've been working on this for a long time. So, yeah, you come in and you add Alan Lazard and now Randall Cobb. Okay, there's your familiarity. And then you add a player like McCole Hardman, who's really interesting, right? But Garrett Wilson's a stud. And you look at a room there, and, they got Uzama, remember, the tight end there, and he's not even their listed starter, but they're pretty talented. And I think that, so when you bring Cobb in, Cobb's not going to be expected to do anything on the field, but off the field, like, what does this hurt? Because if
Cobb
nothing
is there
else,
to make Aaron Rodgers feel better and feel more comfortable in his time in New York. And that's not a bad thing. It's just the reality.
I think it's a little different than that, though. I almost think Cobb's there to help coach these receivers, like this group. And Lazard can do that some, but, like Cobb, if it were just to make Aaron Rodgers comfortable, don't you think that Cobb would be more of a, make him more comfortable on the field? I don't know. Maybe it is like, and it honestly, like, if you're Aaron Rodgers and you're just like, this is my buddy and he's just going to make my time here more enjoyable. Come on. But you could do that without giving him a spot on the roster. You know what I mean? Like, you could get him there without taking a spot on the roster. I think that Cobb is there. And by the way, Cobb sort of mentoring McCole Hardman is an interesting concept to consider. But, like, Cobb can come into that room right now and just the little things, because we saw Aaron Rodgers late in the year, right in Green Bay, begin to connect with some of those young receivers. So just to have another mind in there, because it doesn't work, and it's all a waste of time if Aaron Rodgers doesn't connect with this group of wide receivers quickly. It's a waste of time, right? You have to have that happen. And so bringing in a player to help do that makes a ton of sense to me, even if he never plays a snap. Now, I think he'll play some snaps, but I think just having his impact as you're going through meetings or sitting at practice and, like, here's what you can do, or here's how Aaron Rodgers throws a ball, here's what you need to expect on this route, that route, whatever. I think if you're the Jets, they're approaching this the right way. They brought in Nathaniel Hackett. They bring in Alan Lazard. Now they're bringing in Randall Cobb. I mean, I think you just say, like, Aaron Rodgers, within reason, what are the things that will help you be the most successful here? Because if you don't do all of those things, you're wasting your time if you're the Jets at this point.
I was trying to think of a comparison of what this was like with another quarterback situation. The closest I can come up with is, it's kind of like a little bit like when Tom Brady went to Tampa and Gronk went with him to Tampa. Like kind of the same thing, although Gronk was still more effective than Randall Cobb will probably be with the Jets. But it would have been, I guess, maybe like, if he tried to recruit Julian Edelman to go down to Tampa with him. That didn't happen, obviously, but kind of the same situation, kind of the same regard there. I don't know. I think Garrett
Dieter with Kansas City for as long as he lasted on that roster is something like that with Mahomes. It's sometimes, and I think, there are front offices that get too stubborn to this. Could the Jets sit there and say, "Oh boy, we can't give up the roster space to bring in Cobb"? And they could. They could say that, or they could say, "We have gone all in with Aaron Rodgers here. We have got to make this thing work to its best ability if we want a chance to win a Super Bowl." And I think at that point, you just have conversations and say, "Aaron, here you've had a chance. Like, you've worked out with the team. Like, what do you think would help us be more successful in like reasonable ways that are actually achievable?" Right? We're not going to go get Devontae Adams for you, but what else? What could we do? And I'm sure that for Rodgers, it's like, man, you guys should bring Randall Cobb in here. Like, he knows the system. He knows us. He knows how to be successful. I think if you can get the roster space, you bring him in. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is sitting there saying you have to bring him in.
No, but also you have to look at it from the emotional perspective also, where we have seen Aaron Rodgers, and this is just a fact, we've seen Aaron Rodgers have meltdowns before. We've seen him be really angry and really upset and really frustrated on the sideline, in press conferences, going on Pat McAfee. Like, those are things that he does. And so if the Jets can mitigate that, and keep in mind, he's going to be in the New York media market where there are going to be people following him left and right. So if they can mitigate it by bringing in somebody he's comfortable with in Randall Cobb, and they've already got Alan Lazard, in the fact, and that's why I say, like, part of this is trying to make him feel better about coming to a new city, a large city like New York, all of that. If the Jets can mitigate the outbursts and the frustrations that we've seen Aaron Rodgers have over the years, that's, of course, I think an added benefit with having a guy like Randall Cobb on the roster.
I don't know what our expectations for the Jets are, and we'll get there with what that should be. Mine, I think, are higher than the general public's right now. I think their win total is around 9.5. Like, I'm pretty optimistic that this can work really well for the Jets. I think that everything is in place. Did it take a little longer? Was the road to get there a little more dramatic than it needed to be? Maybe. But I do think that things are lining up for this to be successful. The offensive line is a little bit shaky because of injury. Mekhi Becton, I saw yesterday, I believe that they did not pick up his option year, which tells me they're not just terribly optimistic about his health. That's a problem. So that would be about it. But I assume that Breece Hall will bounce back and be, for most of the year, if not 100%, pretty close to it. So I think they'll be able to run the ball. I already think they have a good defense. I think they've got a coach who has enough of a personality to, allow Rodgers to be himself, but to also not waver from the direction of the team, right? He's not a pushover, basically. And Nathaniel Hackett is a big part of what Aaron Rodgers did. A lot of the same of Randall Cobb. And I heard Rodgers, I think it was his introductory press conference, mention Hackett specifically, right? So clearly that also means something. The Jets are doing this the right way. It was a little dicey on the way there, right? And probably took a little too long, but it got done. And they've done everything they needed to do to make this work. And from the beginning of all this, it was like, man, Rodgers to the Jets makes a lot of sense, right? They're loaded with young talent. They've got a coach people are on board with. and they seem like they're close, right? They're close. They're quarterback away. I mean, they were close without much at all at quarterback. Where does Aaron Rodgers put them? Even if it's not MVP Aaron Rodgers, right? Like, it doesn't have to be 2 years ago Aaron Rodgers, although I think it's probably going to be closer to that than people think. I don't undersell their impact. I think they're going to compete in that division. I don't know if I think that they're going to be able to get through all of Buffalo, Cincinnati, Kansas City. Now, I think you've got to put Baltimore back in that list. You've got to put the Chargers back in that list.
I think they win the division.
You think they'll surpass Buffalo?
I think they'll surpass Buffalo. I think that they will surpass the Dolphins. New England, I think New England finishes last in that division.
They're past New England, and I agree with you on the Dolphins. Buffalo's interesting because, all the hype around Buffalo was there last year. Now they don't win that playoff game, and all the hype seems to be gone. I think that may be a bit premature, but I'm high enough on the Jets to say they'll compete with Buffalo, and that's not a knock on Buffalo. And I think you have to look at it right now as, what if everything goes well? What if everything goes right in New York? And I think as you have these conversations of what the ceiling is, that's what you assume. And if everything goes right, the Jets are a Super Bowl contender. If Rodgers returns to the level we saw him 1 year ago, not last year, but the year before when he was back-to-back MVP, right? If he can get to that, which I think is absolutely possible, if they get Breece Hall back and they can run the ball the way that we think that they can do, and they play the same level of defense they've played, I think the difference in the Jets last year to the Jets with Aaron Rodgers is Super Bowl good. I really do. And I'm not saying I'm picking them to win the Super Bowl. I'm not, right? Like, I'm absolutely not going to do that. But I am saying I think they're in the mix. And if they were in the NFC, like, let's do this. Let's have this exercise. Plug the Jets into the NFC right now. Where do they sit in the power rankings of the NFC? Because I think it might be 1.
I'd probably go 2. I think it'd probably go Eagles and then the Jets would be my
Eagles,
thought.
You're right. 2 is right. 2 is the right
maybe
answer.
the 49ers.
But I'd put them ahead of San Francisco.
Yeah, San Francisco 3 maybe at this point, just because of the uncertainty at quarterback for San Francisco. But I mean, yeah, they would be. I mean, it's no secret, and we've talked about it before, and everybody has, how much more difficult the AFC is than the NFC right now. Right now, you've got Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, and then everybody else, and it's a big step down. But other than that, I mean, you've got all these loaded teams in the AFC. I know we haven't even talked about the fact that the Chiefs re-signed Jerick McKinnon and they declined Clyde Edwards-Helaire's fifth-year option. So there are definitely some even more shakeups going on in the AFC right now. But yeah, I mean, it's no secret how loaded the AFC is.
Let's talk about that real quick with the Chiefs, because I do think the Chiefs are still the Super Bowl favorite. Are you good with the Pacheco-McKinnon combo to run it back? That seems to me still a little bit light, because I like Pacheco's game. It's relatively one-dimensional we've seen so far. Maybe there's more there. If you could tell me McKinnon's going to be healthy again, I'd love it, but that just never really happened over his career. Clyde Edwards-Helaire will be there still this year, so I guess it's okay.
I was going to say, don't count out the potential of him still performing at a decent level for the Chiefs. I'm off the bandwagon of Edwards-Helaire being this game-changing running back for Kansas City.
Not.
Like, that's not going to happen. But he can still contribute, and he's going to have to if he wants to continue his career with someone else. Like, he's got to play well this season, right? If the Chiefs declined, his option, then he's basically playing for his job not only in Kansas City but elsewhere if he chooses to go somewhere else.
Yeah, it is, and I think they're fine. I think this is an interesting year for a guy like Isaiah Pacheco. If he can replicate what he did, I guess I just have a hard time envisioning this, and I don't lean one way or the other. I'm totally up in the air, down the middle. Pacheco, is he going to be a Chief? I don't know. 3 years from now, 2 years from now, I just don't know the answer there. And I remember when Kareem Hunt, prior to his boneheadedness, was in his prime, and just sometimes imagine how much more crazy the offense could be if they could really elevate to that. And I don't know. Like, I don't know if I see Pacheco that way. I mean, I think a combination of Pacheco and a healthy McKinnon is enough. But, like, I think I probably lean the other way from a lot of people. Like, I don't know that 2-3 years from now I'm envisioning Pacheco as this 3-down back in this offense. Love the story. Hope I'm wrong about that. I hope he's the guy because I think it's a great story and he's a really fun player to watch. I just don't know if I see that.
I also don't think that we want to undersell the importance of the Chiefs bringing back Jerick McKinnon. I mean, he was a revelation last season. I feel like
Sure.
both him and Pacheco were in different ways, but what McKinnon did out of the backfield and in the pass catching game with Patrick Mahomes, that was great. And he had a great Super Bowl, great playoff run. So that's important to have him back too. I was wondering when the draft happened last week, if the Chiefs went running back, if they would ultimately bring back McKinnon or not. They didn't go running back, and they're bringing back McKinnon.
You know, it's a tricky stat. Let me just say this about McKinnon. He's become a revelation in the pass game, but you know, early in his career, he just never carried a big load. Right? He had in his rookie year, he carried it 113 times. Then he had a bunch of injuries, only carried it 52 times. And then a combined 300 carries from 2016 to 17. And then we've just seen him hurt, right? And he's become a great receiver for Kansas City. And they're just limiting his reps, right? That's the ticket for Jerick McKinnon. If you're Kansas City, you just limit his reps and you let Pacheco be the bell
recipe.
cow.
Yeah.
But it is, again, history in his career tells us to count on him to be healthy like that again. That's more unlikely than likely. So can Clyde Edwards-Helaire step in if McKinnon misses games and become that change-up? Maybe, but they're gonna be missing something out of the offense when McKinnon's not there. That's why we thought, like, at the time when we were watching the draft, it was like, oh, Deuce Vaughn's still sitting there. Like, you need that kind of a change-up back, but it's okay. He ended up in the perfect spot. All right, 869-1240. Joel Embiid is the MVP, and it looks like he'll be able to play game 2. We'll talk about that a little bit. We have one more giveaway to get through as we make our way through this Wednesday edition. Albrocht and Caster on Sports Daily on KFH. All right, welcome back, everybody. It is Sports Daily on KFH. We're glad to have you here. Glad to make you a part of the show. While we start the segment this time, let's set this giveaway up to the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 3. That is tomorrow at 7 o'clock, Boulevard Theater in Town West Square. Let's give away a pair of tickets right now. Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 3, Marvel fans. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, sneak peek at the Boulevard Theater in Town West Square. Always appreciate these. We'll give those to our first caller right now to the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. Jad will get us a winner. Tommy, Joel Embiid finally gets it done. After, 3 straight back-to-back or 2 straight back-to-back years, he's the league MVP. He goes in over Nikola Jokic and becomes the 4th international player to win the award. Hakeem Olajuwon, Steve Nash, Dirk Nowitzki all had it. 33 points a game and 10 rebounds a year. This feels right. It's interesting to me for Embiid and just the NBA in general that it's now the 3rd straight year a center has won this award, with Jokic getting it for 2 years in a row. And I wonder if we're beginning to see a shift back to big men in the NBA. You know, it's all cyclical, right? We saw the shift to the guards, and then big men were undervalued, and now it seems like they're being tremendously valued. Just look at the teams left in the playoffs, right? A lot of them have really good big men. A lot of them are built around good big men. But good for Embiid, who's become one of the more affable, I think, characters in the NBA. Just about everybody likes him. He's interesting all the time. Good to see that he's likely back for game 2 of that series. But your KU guy, Tommy, Embiid, this is good, right? Like, this is something I think people around here can kind of feel good about.
Yeah, the first former KU player to win the NBA MVP since Wilt Chamberlain back in like 1968. You know, it's been a long time since that's happened, but good for Joel Embiid. His story is so cool. Didn't start playing basketball until high school. was very, very raw going into college. You saw flashes of the brilliance when he was at KU for that 1 year, and then you weren't sure if it was actually going to pan out for him or not. A lot of different injuries that happened for Embiid, and I know that there are stories of him, thinking about quitting multiple different times, as that entire rehab process and all of that was going on. Here he is now. He's a great personality, a great character, fun to watch, fun to follow. He's funny. He's got charisma. And so I'm really happy for him. And being able to watch what he did this entire season was special. And the fact that the Sixers are, still in the playoffs and they're still in that hunt, it's going to be fun to watch what they can do in this series.
And I think I jumbled my words a while ago. So Olajuwon, Nash, and Nowitzki were the first international players before this international flair that we've had now. But, you go and Giannis, did Giannis win? Yeah, it's the fifth consecutive year because Giannis got it in 19 and 20. Then Jokic got it in 21 and 22, and now Embiid. So 5 straight years. And then you've got this phenom, Victor Wembanyama, coming that's going to be the top pick this year. Another 7'2", very versatile big man. And the international game has become really interesting, but you look at it, Tommy, and I wonder if we can ever draw some of these international players overseas to play, right? Now that we have NIL and these things, because that we're headed that way and we have been, but the international part of this game is just exploding. Embiid came over, right? Why not if you're some of these places with these NIL opportunities, do you not go after some of these stars? Like, what if Jokic had played college basketball in the U.S.? What if Giannis had? What if Wembanyama now has? That would be awesome. How do we get these international guys to come over and play college basketball here? No offense to the European leagues, which clearly prepares these guys well, right?
It's really tough. It's really tough to expect that, especially, if they're are guys that are looking at being one of the top picks in the NBA draft. I mean, why would you, even with NIL, why would you go and spend a year, in college when you can cash in with that NBA contract right away? So that's a really difficult proposition, even with the world of NIL, for the top level of those players. I think that there is now a bigger decision to be made for some of those guys that, they could go to the G League right away or whatever that developmental league is, or they could go and do that sort of thing right away, or go and play in college for a year to get drafted. I think that there is that decision that, it's more, I don't know, it's a little bit of a tougher decision to make for those guys. But if you're going to be like 1 or 2 in the NBA draft right out of high school, just do that instead of going to college.
I want to do this on another day. I want us to identify who we think will be the next American-born player to win the MVP. Because you look at it right now, and with Luka in the mix also, with Luka and Jokic and Embiid and Giannis, and, this great generation of American players sort of aging out a little bit, who's it going to be?
That's a really good question.
Is it Jason Tatum? Is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander going to continue to take the right steps? I don't know, but as I'm looking at this and thinking about, we're just cracking the surface with Wembanyama coming over, with Luka, who might be the most talented player in the world, and Jokic and Giannis, and now Embiid. Who's it going to be? Who's going to be the next great American to take over the NBA? Let's have that conversation later this week, because I think it's a fascinating one to try and have. I don't know the answer, by the way. The last year's number 1 pick, Paolo Banchero, he doesn't qualify, right?
Yep.
What who's it? And has he been named the Rookie of the Year? He's going to be the Rookie of the Year, right? But either way, he doesn't qualify. He was born in Seattle. But where is he? I'm going to have to look into that because he may be a candidate. His nationality, I'll have to get a definitive definition on, because he was born in Seattle and then spent some time in other places. He played high school basketball. I guess he qualifies. He qualifies. So Banchero, maybe that's the guy. Grew up in Seattle. Just has, his parents came over, but he's an American. So maybe it's Paolo Banchero. We're going to do a little research on this. We'll come back. We'll wrap up this edition of Sports Daily.
The NBA playoffs are here, and you can turn crossovers into cash with FanDuel.